1471. Now, this is a little bit complicated because it appears that he reigned twice. First, from the 31st of August 1422 to the 4th of March 1461. Then there was a gap of 9 years, and then he reigned from the 3rd of October 1470 to the 11th of April 1471. So, how did that come to be? We shall find out. So Henry VI became king aged only 8 months old when his father Henry V died in France. As he grew up, it appeared that Henry VI was not a well man. Some people thought he shouldn't be king, and others wanted to rule on his behalf. Their squabbling started the Wars of the Roses, which you all know is one of the most famous times in history, in British history. Many TV shows, books, and lots of other different things have been based on the Wars of the Roses. All Henry wanted was peace, but his fierce wife and his enemies wouldn't let him be. Oh, that's really sad. He sounds like just a guy who wants a peaceful life. So, when his dad, Henry V, died in France, Henry VI became king. It transpired that he suffered from some kind of psychological disorder, just like his grandfather, the Mad King of France. So you can probably see some more Game of Thrones terminology coming through here. Henry V's cousin, Richard, the Duke of York, was next in line to the throne, and therefore, when Henry fell ill, Richard took charge. Alright, so that's probably describes or answers why there was a 9-year gap. He was very ill and his cousin took the throne. When the king appeared to recover, Richard was thrown out by Henry's wife, Margaret of Anjou, and the other members of his Lancaster family. Those people descended from John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster. So Richard and the other Yorkists, those descended from John of Gaunt's brother Edmund, Duke of York, decided that a mad king was no king at all, and that a Yorkist should sit on the throne instead. This started the Wars of the Roses, so called because the symbol of the House of York was a white rose, and the symbol of the House of Lancaster was a red rose. Even when he was in his right mind, poor Henry had no interest in fighting. He liked peace and quiet, books and colleges. Henry, I hear you. It was his fierce wife who led his armies against the Yorkist rebels. There were many battles and important men on both sides were killed, including Richard, Duke of York. And I'm sure there's a song about him, the grand old Duke of York. He had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill and he marched them down again. And when they were up, they were up. And when they were down, they were down. And when they were only halfway up, he marched them down again. I would be very embarrassed if that wasn't the Duke of York, Richard. Anyway, Richard's son Edward was now even more determined to Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, who kept switching sides, put him back onto the throne. It wasn't to last. Just 6 months later, Edward returned and got the throne back for good. This time, Henry's stay in prison wasn't so long. He died, supposedly of pure displeasure and melancholy, but quite possibly murder. Shortly afterwards, you can see his grave in St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. Oh, poor Henry. Seems like he was really, really mentally unwell, and people kept forcing him to do things he didn't want to do. That's really, really sad. Crowning achievement. Henry VI founded both Eton College and King's College, Cambridge, and every year on the 21st of May, the day Henry died, people from both Eton and King's still go to the Tower of London and meet in the room where the King died. Here they hold a ceremony called the Lilies and Roses, in which they lay down flowers to remember their founder's death. Oh, that's actually really quite touching. So, awkward end. Henry VI's illness was probably the same as that of his grandfather, the mad King Charles of France. Charles had begun to believe he was made of glass and couldn't be touched in case he smashed. Henry heard angels singing, and when he was really ill, couldn't recognize people around him or sometimes even move. He was completely unaware when news was brought to him of the birth of his son. Worst of all, during the Second Battle of St. Albans in 1461, the king laughed and sang in the midst of bitter fighting. But of course, none of this was Henry's fault. He was just sick, and it must have been terrible for him to be thrown into prison and left there to die. That is the most tragic story I've ever heard. I actually feel really, really sorry for him. Poor Henry VI. So let's look at him. And I mean, yeah, he does look like a sweet, disturbed, gentle soul. He looks quite placid. Again, he doesn't have the facial hair like his predecessors. And he wears very, very simple robes with the chain hair, unadorned by any sort of finery. So, poor Henry VI. Let's look at his wife. Oh no, we'll do the timeline first and his wife will probably pop up. So in 1421, Henry is born. And in 1422, Henry VI succeeds to the throne. In also 1422, Henry V's brother Humphrey acts as protector to Henry VI. We read about Humphrey in the previous video. He was an all-round kind of good guy, but unfortunately he was accused of treason and he didn't live to see his trial. Then in 1429 we have the Siege of Orleans, which the Daily Monarch tells us about. Another turning point in the 100 Years' War as Joan of Arc leads French troops to victory in their first major success since the crushing defeat at Agincourt in 1415. The city, which holds both strategic and symbolic significance for both sides, fell into French control just 9 days after Joan's arrival. And a lot of you have asked me to do some presentation on Joan of Arc, which I will be more than happy to do. I don't actually know too much about Joan of Arc, surprisingly, so I'm really interested to do that video at some point on this channel. In 1431, Joan of Arc is burned at the stake for heresy. Joan of Arc was captured and found guilty of heresy, aged just 19 years old. Joan of Arc was condemned to death by being burnt at the stake. In Margaret of Anjou. She was born in 1430 and died in 1482. Margaret of Anjou was the wife of Henry VI. She was as strong as he was weak, and her hatred for Henry's powerful protector, Richard the Duke of York, led directly to the Wars of the Roses. Fierce and fearless, Margaret led her husband's forces into battle, and if a battle could be won by sheer feistiness, Margaret surely would have won it. As it was, she didn't. She lost everything but her life. Margaret of Anjou, you are going on my badass women list. And that's the Margaret of Anjou. In 1453, the end of the 100 Years' War. The French defeat the English at the Battle of Castillon, ending the 100 Years' War and English power on the continent. In 1453, Richard, Duke of York, becomes Lord Protector. That's not a very good picture of Richard. Oh, I don't mean to laugh, but someone could have drawn him better. So, Richard, 1411 to 1460. Richard was one of the wealthiest men of his time, and in medieval England, this made him one of the most important. When Henry VI became ill, Richard was appointed Lord Protector of the realm. However, his idea of protection went a bit further than just looking after the king. He decided his family would do a better job of ruling, and so began the Wars of the Roses. Naughty, cheeky man. So in 1455, the Wars of the Roses begin. The Battle of St. Albans is the first fight in the struggle for power between the Yorkists and the Lancastrians, the Red and the White Roses. In 1460, James II, King of Scotland, is killed. In 1470, Henry VI is put back on the throne, but the next year he dies in 1471. Wow, there is a lot going on in Henry VI's rule, and literally it's hectic, really hectic. There is a couple of other people we haven't looked at. We've looked at Henry V, Richard, Margaret of Anjou, Joan of Arc. We've looked at Edward. We haven't gone on to Edward IV yet, who is Edward, Prince of Wales. Let's have a look. Edward, 1453 to 1471. He was the Prince of Wales. So Edward grew up in the shadow of the Wars of the Roses. His dad, Henry VI. Okay, so Edward is Henry VI's kid. Was kicked off the throne, and his fierce mum, Margaret of Anjou, kept on fighting to get it back. The Wars of the Roses eventually took Edward's life, as well as that of his father, thereby ending the Lancastrian line. But we'll come on to that in a minute. Who was Anne Neville? Anne Neville, 1456 to 1485. She was Princess of Wales, later Queen Anne. Anne was the daughter of the rebel Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, and she found herself pushed from one side to the other in the Wars of the Roses. Married first to the Lancastrian Prince of Wales, son of Henry VI, which I think was the Edward that we just saw. After his death, she was shunted over to the Yorkist side and married Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Together they became Richard III and Queen Anne, which we are coming on to a bit later. So a lot of information to process, but let's see how much we have processed. So question 1 of 5. Henry VI descended from which family line? Was it Hanover, Windsor, York, or was an infant king? Was it Richard of York, Simon de Montfort, Richard Neville, or Humphrey of Lancaster? I am going to go for Richard of York. Oops. Okay, so it was actually Humphrey of Lancaster, who was Henry V's brother and protector of the baby Henry VI. So Humphrey of Lancaster. Question 3 of 5. Who stepped in as Lord Protector when Henry VI was too unwell to rule? Was it his mother, Catherine of Valois, his cousin, Richard, Duke of York, or his wife, Margaret of Anjou? This is where I got confused. He stepped in when he was too unwell, but when he was a baby, it was the other guy. Correct. Henry VI's cousin, Richard, Duke of York, stepped in as Lord Protector, although it seemed he wanted the crown for himself. Cheeky. Question 4 of 5. What name was given to the wars between the House of York and the House of Lancaster? Was it the War of the Roses, 7 Years' War, the 100 Years' War, or the First World War? Of course, it's the Wars of the Roses. The symbol for the House of York was a white rose, and the symbol for the House of Lancaster was a red rose. So the wars between these houses was known as the Wars of the Roses. So last question, question 5 of 5. Which famous school was founded by Henry VI? Was it Epsom College, Marlborough College, Eton College, or Harrow? And I'm going to go Eton College. Eton College was founded by Henry VI, as was King's College in Cambridge. We got 4 crowns out of 5. So, that brings us to the end of Henry VI, and, well, what can I say? The poor guy just wanted his books, his peace and quiet, but a fierce woman, queen, pushed him to, be more than what he wanted to be. He was mentally very unwell, but people kept taking advantage of him and making him do things he didn't want to do.